Hello and welcome. Coming up tonight, does anyone understand the Tories' immigration plans? Well, I hope their leader, Kemi, Badenoch does. Why are we selling fighter jets to a country like Turkey where the president's opponents end up in jail? I'll ask the Defence Secretary, John Healey. Pippa and Screeny will explain why the Healey by-election was a disaster for both Labour and Tory parties.
I've been hearing from politicians who are anxious about what this means for their electoral fortunes next May.
And refusing at any price to move out of the magnificent palace that is the Peston show's Friends space, the SNP Stephen Flynn and the Conservative Esther McVey. Watch out, I've told you in the past about Mr Overton and his window, or the social and political space in which normal discourse takes place. It's in constant flux. One example is that in less than 10 years, China has gone from being the UK's potential ally to an existential threat, hence the hysteria over the alleged parliamentary spies not being prosecuted. And the immigration conversation has morphed from one about limiting numbers coming to the UK into whether the promises of the Tories and reform to expel hundreds of thousands of non-UK citizens are humane and practical. What about racism? Is it in the window or not? Well, decide for yourself on the basis of recent remarks by senior Tory and Reform MPs. There was the Tory Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, saying he hadn't seen a white face in a part of Birmingham, Handsworth. His leader interpreted his remarks as an acceptable endorsement of her concerns about what she calls multiculturalism. Another set of remarks was those by the Reform MP Sarah Pochin, saying she's driven mad by TV adverts that are full of black and Asian people. Labour and the Lib Dems criticised her as saying racist things, but initially the Tory Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp refused to do the same and pointed to what he called legitimate concerns about large-scale immigration. Farage didn't like what his colleague had expressed, but no, she wasn't a racist, he said. What's clear is the language that undermines community cohesion is being sanitised, even if opinion polls show most British people don't like it, which paradoxically may be bad news for Farage. Pochin has given centre and left voters a moral cause to defeat Farage. Labour, Greens, Lib Dem and SNP supporters will pull together and vote tactically for whichever of their parties is more likely to keep him out of power. Unconvinced? Well, the carefully by-election shows it may already be happening. Pippa.
Well, Robert, I've spent a lot of time since that by-election talking to MPs from the main parties, and their despair was palpable. Many are worried that no matter what they say or do, the public aren't listening to them anymore. So I want to show you this chart by Chris Clark. Each pink bar shows the average net approval ratings of the major party leaders. While Starmer's sunk to record lows, is actually part of a longer-term slump. See how it starts to dip from around 2003 when Tony Blair took a hammering over the Iraq War. This collapse played out in excruciating detail for the main parties in Caerphilly. This line shows Labour plummeting from 46% of the vote last time down to just 11%, while the Tories fell from 17% down to just 2%, while Reform shot up to 36% and Plaid won the seat on 47%. Now, this defied earlier polls, with many speculating from the high turnout that tactical voting was at play. There's also been a shift in support by political leaning. This graph shows how left-wing parties, mostly Labour and Plaid, but also the Lib Dems, picked up almost 80% of the vote in 2021, while the right-wing bloc, the Tories and Reform UK, took just over 20% between them. Now look at how that changed in 2025, with just over 60% of voters in Caerphilly leaning left and almost 40% leaning right. The gap is closing, and in May, we'll see how this plays out across Wales, with Plaid and Reform vying for control. Robert.
Thanks, Pippa. So I want to pick up on the Caerphilly by-election. Esther, your party is supposed to be the national party. There are not supposed to be no-go areas in Great Britain for the Tories, but 2% in Caerphilly. I mean, it's desperate, isn't it?
Well, what you usually find with by-elections is they go to two-horse races. And I would have thought the most surprising thing in that Caerphilly by-election is that one of those horses weren't Labour, somewhere that, you know, who've run it for over 100 years. And Conservatives were never going to win there. In some of our great successful electoral years, we've never won there.
Yeah, but terrible for Labour, but come on, 2%, Esther.
Well, no, what you will have seen, but we've never had a good polling there, Robert.
But Pippa showed you that literally just 4 years ago you had, you know, 1 in 5 voters there, and now you got 1 in 50.
So what you will have seen is tactical voting, and so what you will have seen is Conservatives probably voting for reform to get the socialist government out, and that's what you've seen. So that is why, as I said, it went to a 2-horse race. So people would then go to the party they think can oust Labour out, and that's what's happened. And that's what they intended to do.
Steve, can I just ask you, the point I sort of made in my introduction, that those who think of themselves in the centre or on the left are, some of them anyway, going to vote simply for the party that defeats Farage. If they happen to be SNP supporters and they decide to vote Green or Labour on that basis, would you applaud them?
Oh, look, if I may, it was almost like the Tories didn't have a horse, they just had a donkey in the race where everyone was trying to run fast. You guys were nowhere to be seen.
But Stephen, like I said, have you turned your back on me?
Sorry.
Like I said, we've never won there, even when we've won 80 seats. Majority
Nobody
over
expected you to
100
win.
years.
Nobody
So we've
expected
never...
you with 2%, come on.
So, and like
but all
I
I'm saying
always...
is, do you think, essentially, if you're on the left of politics, the big challenge is to keep Nigel Farage out, which some do think that?
So in Scotland, that's not the big opportunity. The big opportunity is that if you...
Reform's doing very well in Scotland.
Oh, they've overtaken the Conservative Party and the Labour Party to become second in the latest opinion poll. A long way behind the SNP, might I add. And I think in Wales, what we've seen was a positive, outward-looking Welsh nationalist party take the lead and drive that lead into a victory, a bit like what the SNP have done in Scotland, where the Labour Party and the Conservative Party took the voters for granted for generations. Now, what we have in Scotland next year is the May election is not just a chance to beat reform, it's not just the chance to perhaps unseat Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, it's a chance to create an independent nation by voting for the SNP and leave the chaos of Westminster that Esther and her political friends and the Tories have presided over, in which Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have continued.
If Plaid Cymru wins next May, what kind of an earthquake is that for Great Britain?
Well, of course, you then have a situation where you'd have a Republican government in Northern Ireland, you'd have a nationalist government in Wales, and you'd have a nationalist government in Scotland. That's not what devolution was meant to lead to, but I think it's a reflection of the fact that Westminster hasn't worked for so long. Britain feels broken because it is broken, and the public know that the opportunity that's in front of them is to completely change the political makeup here and make their lives better.
But Esther, for somebody like you who believes in the United Kingdom, this prospect of having nationalists, Sinn Féin, Plaid, SNP in power in the three nations, that's very worrying, isn't it?
Well, it is, because I obviously would like the United Kingdom to remain as such. And I think, you know, it's a long way to go. I think, unfortunately, Labour have been a disaster in record time. I think they'd promised change. They haven't given the change that people thought would happen. And therefore, I guess they are turning to lots of other parties in that regard. But I think there's a long way to go. And I think what people need to see now is not just the words of this is awful, pointing out the obvious. I think what people should be looking for at the next elections is, and how are you going to solve that problem? We're going to have to look a bit deeper, and that's true of polling, that's true of presenters of shows. You need to know, and how are you going to solve that problem? Don't tell us what's wrong. We hear that all the time from the sort of minority parties. We want to hear now, how are you going to do it? And have you got the infrastructure to deliver it?
And Stephen, I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but I've got to ask a very, very quick question to Esther, which I'm afraid I ask too many of your colleagues, which is, would you consider joining Reform?
No, I wouldn't. I'm a Conservative, and if I've managed to be a Conservative coming from Socialist Central in Liverpool, I'm going to remain there. But I do think Conservatives need to be more conservative, and I do think actually Kemi Badenoch has showed the way with that on things, whether it's like stopping the idiotic policy of net zero, pushing us all into poverty, whether it is mass spending by
Come on, we've got
a
tons of
socialist
stuff,
state.
'cause I'm about to interview your leader. You can talk about all of this.
You asked me, and that's why I'm
interview.
staying Conservative.
OK, lovely. As I say, much more to talk about in all those areas in just a minute or two. But first, I want to go to an interview that I did a little bit earlier with the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. I began by asking her whether she noticed, as Sarah Poaching clearly did from Reform, the ethnicity of actors in TV adverts.
Yes, I do. I do. Not always, not often, but occasionally.
But feeling that you've been driven mad, which is what Sarah Poaching said, is that racist?
Well, I found her comments quite shocking. I can't imagine if my children heard that, and it's not a surprise that she's withdrawn her comments because she knew that they were wrong.
But so many people have said they're just straightforwardly racist. What do you think?
Well, I think that Reform wants us to be talking about them, and quite frankly, and I say this as a black person, I'm tired of having to argue about whether or not what Reform is doing fits into a particular category. I'm the leader of the Conservative Party. I want to talk about what Conservatives are doing, not what Reform is doing. We're talking about fixing the country. They're talking about TV adverts. Not serious.
OK, one very quick final question on this. Had one of your MPs said this, would you withdraw the writ? Would you throw them out?
Well, it depends on exactly what they had said. But again, we spend quite a lot of time arguing the toss on these things. Sure. We saw it with the Grooming Gangs inquiry, and people actually missed the elephant in the room, which was the girls who were struggling. So I tend to, just focus on the key issues.
We might come back to Grooming Gangs, you never know. But first, we're going to focus a little bit on immigration.
Just after Keir Starmer warned that Britain risked becoming an island of strangers as he announced his immigration plan, the Conservatives published their own bill, with little impact at the time. This is now getting more scrutiny after Tory MP Katie Lamb told the show last week that some people who were here legally would have to be deported. So what does the bill say? Well, one of the changes is to indefinite leave to remain, also known as ILR, which allows people to live, work and study in the UK for as long as they like. But the Tory bill says that if they're a criminal, receive what is known as social protection, or have an annual income of less than £38,700, they face being stripped of the right to be here, retrospectively. Who would this actually affect? There's no data on the incomes of people on ILR, but we do know that about 70% of the UK population make less than the £38,700 threshold. Those receiving social protection includes people who've received benefits such as universal credit, and we know that the nationwide figure for that is 34% of people in work. The bill also suggests it would include anybody on ILR who gets the state pension, and across the UK, that's 98% of pensioners. So how many people could the Tory deportation plans impact? We spoke to the Migration Observatory at Oxford University, who said that as the bill stands, it would likely affect the majority of those who are on indefinite leave to remain. They note, though, that while the Tory plan doesn't exempt EU citizens on the settlement scheme, they do already have protections which mean they should be able to stay regardless. Even without those EU citizens, we're still talking about hundreds of thousands of people. Robert.
So, Kemi, are we talking about a Tory government deporting hundreds of thousands? And indeed, your bill doesn't make a distinction between EU migrants and migrants from the rest of the world. And on, Migration Observatory's figures, we could be talking about a couple of million people being unable to stay here under your plan. So what are the facts?
So the facts are, first of all, I'm thrilled that we're talking about this because we put these policies out first as amendments on a bill in February and then again in that package in May. Nobody wanted to talk about them, and now we're talking about them after quite a lot of it has been superseded by us leaving the ECHR, the policy which I announced in in the beginning of October at our party conference. So, but
hang on, how does the ECHR decision have an impact on this bill? Because this bill is still there.
significantly, because one of the things which we were trying to do was deal with the large number of people who came in from 2021 who would become eligible.
So this is the so-called Boris bulge.
Who would become eligible for ILR next year. So there was a Labour bill, and we put through amendments to try and deal with the situation as of this year.
Part of the bill said deport people who are earning a fraction less than £38,000. Is that still the policy?
So the policy is that if people are here who cannot contribute, then they need to leave.
So it is, we are talking hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, that may be the case, but that in and of itself is a scandal. How is it, as the Migration Observatory said, that so many people who have come to our country need benefits? That cannot be right.
OK, well, I'm asking a slightly different question. There was another implication of the bill which I wanted to check, is if you have lived and worked here and you retire and you're then getting the state pension, would those people, because on the basis of how you worded it, it actually says social protection is all that counts. The state pension is a form of social protection. Would those people be asked to leave?
But the principle is what we're talking about, people who have contributed. The state pension...
But many of those people will have contributed.
Yes, so that won't apply.
So you will, if you ever legislated, you would make that clear in the legislation?
So, yes, so when you put down amendments, you don't go into as much detail, and quite a lot of things come out during the debates. So in the debates, we talked about the cohort we were referring to, many of the people who came in since 2021, since we brought in the points-based immigration system, which I have acknowledged did not work as intended. In many ways, it actually failed. And what I want the Conservative Party to do now is be part of the solution. And what we have actually been able to do is drag Labour to where we are. Labour refused to talk about indefinite leave to remain and making changes to it. Now it is their policy. That's the work that we're doing in opposition, getting the government's policy to be in a better place, because we've got to lower immigration. It is far too high.
So, tons to put to Esther and Stephen. Can I just ask you, Esther, first of all, were you surprised that your leader refused to call Sarah Perchin's remarks racist?
I think what she was saying, I want to talk about the substance and not all the time be talking about reform. I think if you want to know if somebody was being racist, what their underlying intentions were, get Sarah Perchin on the show. And what do you think?
What do you think?
Well, what was she trying to point out? What was she trying to say?
What was she trying to point out?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. And if it was something which Channel 4 survey came out with at the end of September, was the proportion of different people being shown on TV, and I think it was pregnant women were the lowest number of people being shown on disabled people were also there, but actually as a proportion there were more ethnic minorities than were a proportion in the public. If that was what she was trying to say, then that is a discussion you should have.
Why
But as
Nigel
Nigel Farage said, she said it in a very clumsy way, a wrong way. I think he called it an ugly way. But I think if we're not allowed to talk about things, question things, and that's also where other people will have an opinion, and they will deem whether it's right or not what you say. But you're trying to close, conversation down?
No, I'm not. I'm not
Okay.
trying to close it down. I'm trying to have a conversation about what her motives are.
And that's what I'm asking. What was it? You're doing it as an item on your show. What do you think?
Well, I will tell you in a minute what I think in part. But Stephen, you go.
Yeah, look, Nigel Farage prides himself on calling a spade a spade, as I think the former Minister for Common Sense used to do as well. If something's racist, you say it's racist, because there are young people right across these aisles in the communities that we represent and Sarah Perchin represents who need to know that their politicians don't accept that as reasonable language. We have a responsibility to ourselves, but also the communities that we represent, to call out hate when we see it. So I have no issue in saying it's racist. What I have an issue with is the fact that the Conservative Party and indeed Nigel Farage today are unable to say that. And I think that that's something that the public will reflect upon very heavily. And if I just got 2% in the polls, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here as an apologist for what Sarah Perchin said.
I mean, so one of the things that companies say, so if you look at some of these adverts, they basically have mixed-race households, and they think that's a very good way of appealing to the maximum number of people with an advert, and they're not trying to simply reflect the exact population makeup of the country. I think the reason people got upset with her, I think it's probably the reason she ended up apologising, was that phrase that she was driven mad by it, which just seemed to most people a very odd reaction. I mean, you're not driven mad by it, are you? Esther, you're not driven mad by these adverts.
I have, but I've never said this.
No, I'm just saying. But do you not accept that it's a very odd thing to say?
I agree. I said with what Nigel said, it was a very clumsy, ugly way of what you said. All I was wondering about, hence I asked you, is what was she trying to say? Was it because it was a phone-in and she got her words wrong and therefore the intent there wasn't there, which is what Nigel was saying? Or was she trying to raise a bigger question?
No.
And you don't think she was?
No, definitely
right,
not.
Well, that's fine.
What happened
and that's why we're having the discussion.
See that mask, it just slipped. And the racism came out. And
so you're calling her a racist?
All right.
What she said was...
Are you
we're going to come back, because I want to talk about this. Lots more I need to...
So you're calling her a racist,
we do have to move on from this. Just, we come back to other things from the interview in a minute or two, because that wasn't the end of the interview with Kemi Badenoch. And the next thing I asked her about was really those remarks that we heard this afternoon from the Deputy National Security Advisor, Matt Collins, who told MPs and Lords that the case against the China spies collapsed because it was Kemi Badenoch's Tory government that refused to classify China as an enemy or a general threat. So surely, I said to the new Conservative leader, that should embarrass her.
But that's not quite what he said. And the Director of Public Prosecutions...
Well, it is quite what he said, because I watched him this afternoon.
If I may, the Director of Public Prosecutions said that the case collapsed because of current government policy. That's one. Two, he asked for evidence. The current government refused to give evidence. Those people were charged under Conservatives and let off under Labour. And finally, where we've seen the witness statement, which Matt Collins produced under this government, where the DPP, the Crown Prosecution Service, is asking for evidence, and what they put was how China was an opportunity. That's the opposite of the evidence they needed to prosecute. What is shocking is that they have refused to give the evidence because they are scared of China. They have a super embassy decision that's coming up. They're not quite sure what they want to do.
Would you cancel the super embassy?
There are so many things wrong with that planning.
Would you tell China they can't have the super embassy?
I think, given everything that we know, certainly, there's something going very, very wrong. It is quite clear that China is a threat. We have a case of alleged spies. We have lots of detail. The director of MI5 gave a speech just 10 or so days ago explaining that threat. And yet this government, led by a former DPP, was unable to make the case. That is a scandal. And there are still many more questions to answer, many more details to come out that will show just how weak this government has been.
Now, the FT has put out a story this afternoon saying that the Office for Budget Responsibility's productivity downgrade will be even bigger than people thought, 0.3 of a percentage point, which increases the Chancellor's black hole to more than £20 billion just from that productivity downgrade. Now, that is because of 14 years of low productivity while you were in power. So this is your black hole, isn't it?
No, it isn't. The Conservative Party is under new leadership. And what I've been saying is that the government needs to live within its means. What we're seeing now is government overspending, spending far too much, for instance, on welfare. We need to cut public spending on welfare, get people into work. If we get Britain working, many of these problems will be solved. Of course, we're unproductive when people aren't at work. And of course,
hang on, but sorry, just to address the point I'm making, which is productivity was wholly inadequate for all the years that your party was in power.
What is the driver of this issue? What is behind the productivity decreases? This is not a UK-specific problem. What we need to see now is how we solve it. Trying to put me on trial for decisions that were made by other people is not going to fix any of those. If I had a time machine, I would go back in time. I do not. All I can say is what we should do now. I'm the leader of the opposition for now, not for 5 years ago. And what I'm saying is we need to get people back to work.
Now, I know you were saying earlier that, you don't want to sort of focus all your time on the embarrassments in another party. But Nigel Farage has made a suggestion today that to speed up the Grooming Gangs inquiry, it should transfer to Parliament. Is that the right decision?
I don't believe that is actually going to work. We have seen cases where evidence given in parliamentary select committees becomes inadmissible. They could prejudice a court case. And also, you can't discuss matters that are sub judice in Parliament. So from what I know, that is not a workable plan. What we need is a national inquiry. I've been calling for this since January. I had a press conference with 3 survivors. They've left. One of them has left the panel. The father of the other is talking about how his daughter's name is being used to claim that she wants Jess Phillips to stay when she does not. It's pretty shabby. We need to get justice for these women.
Nigel Farage did make a personal attack on you today, saying that when you were the Minister for Women, you never mentioned the Grooming Gang scandal. Do you want to reply to him?
Well, we had an inquiry going on. There was a lot of work being done. And actually, we had a Grooming Gangs task force that has found since 807 perpetrators. So I did my job when I was Minister for Women. I actually spent a lot of my time fighting for women's rights when we were having, serious issues about violation of single-sex spaces. I was the person who was intervening in Scotland when they were bringing in some terrible legislation. So I have a record that I'm proud of. But right now, we have seen the outcome of the last inquiry. It's insufficient. There's a task force that shows that there may even be cases taking place now. Still more girls being groomed and raped. We need to deal with that now. I'm not interested in Nigel Farage's personal insults. I'm interested in what we can do for a lot of these girls. They're sick and tired of politicians squabbling over things. They want justice, and that's what they deserve.
You and Labour humiliated in the Caerphilly by-election. You got 2%. It's as close to nil as makes no difference. That's embarrassing.
Well, given that we have never, ever done well in Caerphilly in 100 years, even at our best, it is not a surprise that when we have just come out of a historic defeat, people will be looking elsewhere. What is shocking is that a seat that Labour has never, ever lost, they came 3rd in. People want to talk about the Conservatives. We already had our punishment at the last election. The government went in with 140-something majority. What are they doing with it? Absolutely nothing. They can't get any legislation through. They're upsetting everyone on left and right. The Prime Minister is weak. He's not showing any backbone. And they're going to continue like this unless they get their act together and start focusing on growing our economy.
Kemi Badenoch, as always, very good to see you.
Thank you, Robert.
Don't go away, because after the break, I will be asking the Defence Secretary, John Healey, why the UK is selling billions and billions of pounds worth of fighter jets to a country that is buying a load of Russian oil. Unmissable interview. See you in a minute.
Welcome to the break. Now, the first ever UK series of celebrity traitors is taking the UK by storm. Even I've been watching it. My teenagers have forced me to sit down. Not really into reality TV. Don't know if you two are both big fans, but how do you think you'd fare on a programme like that, Stephen?
I have to admit I've never watched it before.
You've never watched Traitors?
I've not. Esther, have you?
No, both in the same boat.
So this is going to be...
brilliant.
This is going to be all right.
We've been sort of told rules, haven't we? Whether
So
we're
got...
faithfuls or traitors.
Yeah.
OK, good. So at
The
least I
only
don't
way's
need
up.
to
Let's
explain
go.
the basics to you. This is obviously getting off to a very good start. So can I ask you to think, given you sort of understand the basics of the show, which celebrity, which politician, I should say, do you think would fare best, go furthest on the show, Esther?
As a faithful or as a traitor?
As a traitor. So basically they have to lie.
OK. Well, they have to lie. Well, I have to say it has to be Sir Keir Starmer, because he's lied ever since he's come into office. He's been Mr. Flip-Flop, Mr. Changing his mind on everything and blaming everybody else. So I'd put him.
Well, given he has teenage children, he may well watch it. So you never know, he may have picked up some tips. Stephen?
Yeah, I probably would have picked one of the previous members of the Tory cabinet, but they all kind of lost their seats, so it's a bit hard. Well, maybe not everyone. It's a bit hard to come forward. But yeah, Nigel likes to spin a mistruth everywhere, so I imagine he'd probably get quite far, I guess.
So in the spirit of traitors, I'd like you to ask you how long you think any of these politicians would last in their current jobs until they're banished. So let's start with Rachel Reeves.
Well, she needs to be banished as she's single-handedly destroying the country. So the sooner she could be banished, the better.
OK, well, so let's go for who you think will be banished first. Stephen.
Yeah, let's get rid of Nigel.
Nigel Farage is going to be kicked out of his current job as Reform Leader first. Do you agree?
Actually, that's not happening. I don't know how this show works. That's definitely not happening. Rachel, yeah.
OK.
Oh, you're going for
Reeves.
Rachel with me?
Yeah.
But we're both...
Who's going out first, do you think?
Oh, actually, the ballot for Kemi is next month. Is that next month?
Stephen's not doing very well at this, is
Kemi,
he?
No,
He's
Kemi.
lined up. So
Let's go
Kemi
Kemi.
for Stephen. And Esther, who do you think is going to be kicked out first?
Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Reeves. Right, we've got those two then. Right, I'm not sure if this would be the most understandable version of the game.
No.
maybe you should tune in and then we can ask you again next
I'm
time.
sorry.
Thank you.
That was one of the funniest breaks. Welcome back. Now, in a few minutes, I'll be talking with the Defence Secretary, John Healey, who is in Turkey. But first, Pippa.
Yes, Robert, I just want to show you today's Sun front page. This is, get the right one, Tupad Zandi, reporting on the continued fallout surrounding Prince Andrew. And there's still murmurings of actions from MPs to try and make the royal finances more transparent, to strip him of his titles, or even summon to be questioned by Parliament. One of our guests tonight has been leading the charge on that, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a lot I want to ask you about Prince Andrew, but I suppose the big question is really this. All the polls show that the British people do not believe he's been properly held to account. So both of you, is there more that Parliament, maybe talk about government in a minute, but is there more that Parliament can and should be doing to hold Prince Andrew to account?
Yeah, look, I would be amazed if we don't see movement in the next couple of weeks, both in respect of the dukedom, which only Parliament can remove through an act.
And how would that go about? How would we see an act or a bill introduced?
Well, an opposition party, looks like the Lib Dems are maybe going to use some of their time to do this, can introduce a motion to.
You've got to get government. Got to get time from the government, haven't you?
Indeed, but look, the government need a win. They are absolutely desperate for something which resonates with the public. And I see the language from government ministers has slightly changed in recent days. We all know where this is going to end up because the public are so outraged that this guy is getting to keep his titles. We know the finances are just mired in secrecy. The biggest surprise to me is it's the fact that myself and others have had to lead the charge on this, and the government haven't just came out and been clear and said to the palace, look, you've done your bit, but we'll take it from here.
I mean, what do you think, Esther? Do you think MPs should be taking more of a public stand on behalf of, many British people who are outraged?
Well, first of all, what a fall from grace, and he has proved himself to be a massive letdown. I actually think the King has handled it well. He has removed his titles. He won't be staying in the lodge, so I do think the King has done a lot. I think
well, he hasn't been moved out. Sorry, just to be clear, Esther, he hasn't left that what looks like to most people a palace yet.
It's not a lodge. It's a castle.
What, as I understand it, he had prepaid for the lease for 75 years, £8 million up front and the renovation costs. And he has a contract for that.
Yeah, he thinks he's got a cast iron contract.
But what he has done, he is seems to me, bowing to pressure, and I guess pressure is coming from him from the king and maybe the king-to-be, and he said, I will move out. I know he's trying to argue the cause for somewhere else to live, one for him and one for Sarah Ferguson. But what I would say
Can I ask you about that?
No.
When you see that front page...
Listen, I'm not defending him.
Sure.
I'm explaining, Robert, what's happening. And what I do think is he does need to be taken out of the limelight. He has been shunned. He has lost his position. But at the moment, when there is so much going on in Parliament, we've got to get, the country's finances back on track. We've got to sort out immigration. We've got to get the rape gang inquiry gone. Do I really think political time should be given? No. I think it needs to be sorted out behind closed doors.
Well,
I think the pressure to be burned.
Because I think if I talk to people in other capitals, right, this is being reported all over the world. It's not just bringing the royal family into disrepute, it's bringing Britain into disrepute.
Yeah, he quite clearly told everyone on these aisles in the interview with Emily Maitlis that he'd broken off contact with the notorious international paedophile Jeffrey Epstein in New York when he travelled to see him in Central Park. We now know that not to be the case because he sent emails to him saying that he couldn't wait to play some more. Yeah. The guy is a disgrace, and all it would take from the government...
nobody is trying to justify it is a disgrace. He should lose his titles. They have been removed, but you want them removed by an act of Parliament as well.
These things don't get covered up behind closed doors with backstage passes. The government should take 10 seconds to come forward to Parliament, say, that's it, it's done, his titles are removed.
Right. And by the way, there is a bill there, and the government could do it if they wanted to do it.
Going to come back to both of you in a bit. First, Pippa.
So just a couple of hours ago, Matt Collins, the Deputy National Security Advisor, confirmed to MPs that China did pose a range of active threats to the UK when alleged spying took place, something he presumably would have said in court if asked. I want to show you something else, though. This chart shows which countries bought fossil fuels from Russia last month alone. As you can see, China is in the lead, buying 5.5 billion euros worth. India, our ally, which Keir Starmer visited this month, in second, followed by NATO member Turkey, where the PM was today, that bought 2.6 billion euros worth. And the EU, one of Ukraine's biggest supporters, yet still dependent on Russian gas, comes fourth. It's estimated that taxes from oil and gas raise as much as half of the Kremlin's budget revenues, ultimately funding Putin's war in Ukraine. This month, the UK sanctioned 40 more ships in Russia's shadow fleet. That's a shady network of vessels subverting the rules the EU and G7 have put in place. This chart shows the capacity of the unsanctioned ships transporting crude oil in pink. Over the last 2 years, these have been gradually sanctioned, shown in the shift to light blue. But look at this. This yellow line shows how much crude oil is exported anyway, busting sanctions and at a seasonal high of 3.7 million barrels a day, keeping the Kremlin's coffers topped up. Robert.
Yeah, so what Pippa just said was absolutely material to my conversation with the Defence Secretary, John Healey, who's in Turkey with the Prime Minister. And I began by asking him why the UK, which is something they've announced today, is selling fighter jets to Turkey, given that that country is supporting Putin by buying the kind of volumes of oil that Pippa has just been telling us about.
You're right. I'm in Turkey today with Keir Starmer. We signed an £8 billion deal. This is the biggest British fighter jet deal for a generation, and it will secure 20,000 jobs for the next 10 years. This is defence driving economic growth in the United Kingdom.
Turkey is the third biggest purchaser of Russian oil. In what sense does helping Turkey help us in our battle against Russia? Surely you should be telling the Turkish government, led by Erdogan, to stop buying the oil.
Look, Turkey may well have good working relations with Russia. That's one thing. But it is a NATO member. It's a staunch supporter of Ukraine. It's a close security ally of countries like the UK. And this deal is not just about the aircraft. It's about the east and west sides of NATO coming together and strengthening our ability to play a bigger part together within NATO. And This is a country now becoming the 10th typhoon nation. And of course, it's the typhoons that are the backbone of our air defence system against Russia and against aggression against NATO countries.
You haven't answered my question. Just straight yes or no. Did you and the Prime Minister ask the Turkish government to reduce its purchases of Russian oil?
I'm not giving you a straight blow-by-blow account of the private discussions that we had with President Erdogan and his defence minister, but I can tell you we talked about the commitment that Turkey has displayed from day one to support, like the UK, Ukraine in the fight today, as well as working with the UK leadership to prepare for a point that we get a peace and that we and Turkey and France, and there's over 30 nations have been involved in this detailed military planning. We're ready, if there's peace, to help Ukraine secure that peace for the long term. No one can doubt whose side Turkey is on.
Much more from my interview with the Defence Secretary, John Healey, and much more from Esther and Stephen after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, welcome to the break. Now, this week, Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister of Canada, and the pop star Katy Perry have made their relationship public. He's the latest in a long line of politicians to date celebrities, including, in fact, his own father, Pierre Trudeau, who famously dated Barbara Streisand and Kim Cattrall. I didn't know that. What do you think about celebrities dating politicians, Stephen? Do you think there's a level of fame that politicians experience is the same as celebrities? Does it undermine their credibility?
Well, surprisingly enough, this is my mastermind topic.
Oh, excellent.
No, definitely not. Look, I seen Justin Trudeau, I'll do a wee name drop here, at the coronation for the King. And it's probably the only occasion in my life where I've seen a guy walk into a room and immediately jerk my neck, because he is a bonny man.
Right.
So fair play to Katie for getting a.
Has she done well?
He's a man who can stop the room. So you're just about looks, is that what you're saying, Steve? You're
It's
not
the hair.
going
It's the
into
hair.
You're just about
Look at
looks,
the hair.
not what's
Look
going
at
on between the ears.
Okay, so Esther, we've drawn up a list of unlikely political couples. Which of these do you think was the most successful? So you can work out who they all are. We've got Churchill and Attlee here, Blair and Brown somewhere. Yep, there we go. Cameron and Clegg, we remember them well. Salmond and Sturgeon. Paisley and McGuinness in the top corner. And Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana.
That's hilarious.
Who was most successful?
Well, they've all had the tensions, the difficult moments, their fallouts. But I think, I guess the one I would like to see, I quite agree with you on this, I think Corbyn and Sultana are going to be a feisty couple going forward, if they ever get going with your party. The Rose Garden, you've got to have Cameron there.
Oh, why was that press conference in the Downing Street?
Oh, were you at that press
conference? Yeah, that big moment in history.
Didn't they make a lovely couple?
Stephen.
Wow, what a choice.
Can alliances between big personalities ever really last, or do you think fallout is inevitable? Looking at them, you might think so.
I think Clegg and Cameron, did they fall out? I thought they were best buddies. I mean, they both kind of look the same and acted the same.
They went their own separate ways.
And we had one last slide, which we don't have time to get to, but some unlikely pairs. Anyone, any thoughts? Who's the least likely?
Well, I like Davey and Zach. That's a good combo.
Got to wrap it. They're not answering the question. Thanks so much.
Welcome back. In the second part of my interview with John Healey, where I was talking to him in Turkey, I mentioned to him that this afternoon Matt Collins, the Deputy National Security Advisor, had told MPs in Lords that the case against alleged China spies collapsed because the previous Tory government refused to define China as an enemy or general threat. But what I wanted to know is, what's his government's position? Is China an enemy?
Yes, of course, China poses economic threats to the UK. It poses security challenges. It also has commercial opportunities and important areas in which we can cooperate for the greater good of the world. No, I mean, Matt Collins was absolutely right in telling the House of Commons. He was explaining that these offences took place between 2021 and 2023. The judgment that needs to be made is based on the policy of the government of the time. But, you know, there's a deeper problem here. And the deeper problem is that that government didn't overhaul the flawed security laws that were decades out of date. They said they would do it in 2015. It took them 8 years until 2023 after these offences were committed. And so that's the real flaw in this case, and perhaps the real reason why it's not been able to be pursued into the courts, which is frustrating for all of us.
Well, we can't know that for sure, but what we do know for sure is that if he had described the policy of this government, what its position is on China, not a straightforward enemy, not a general threat, the case would still have collapsed. So you're no better than the last lot.
Well, that sort of hypothetical doesn't get you anywhere. You know, these are cases that had to be pursued on the basis of the policy at the time, based on the legislation at the time, both of which were flawed, which is why this case has simply collapsed. And I can't tell you how frustrated we are in government, and I think that reflects how people more generally, and I certainly know across party in the House of Commons, people are really fed up with this.
I want to bring you back to the UK just briefly now. 11% of the vote in the Healey by-election. I mean, this is a part of Britain that is absolute Labour heartlands. I mean, I can hardly remember a worse humiliation for the Labour Party.
And look, I'm sitting as part of a Labour government. I'm sitting in Turkey, having signed the biggest combat jet deal that Britain's seen since 2007 when Labour was last in government. And this is going to help secure thousands of jobs in the UK for the next decade. It's going to pump £8 billion into the UK economy. And this is Labour doing what we set out to do. We're still at the early stages, but I'm looking to deliver for defence, I'm looking to deliver for Britain. And when people in Healey wanted change, our job is to make sure that over the next 3 years, we can demonstrate how it's Labour in government that can bring that change, and so that we can bring the country together when we face the next election.
I mean, why do you think, however, voters are not yet persuaded by you, may never be persuaded by you? Is it because, in the words of the new deputy leader, Lucy Powell, you have failed to build what she calls a progressive consensus?
I have to say to you, look, I live in Rotherham. I've served the people of Rotherham for 28 years. If I was down at the Masons pub talking about the progressive consensus, people would just look at me like I'm mad. No, look, they're hurting. They're feeling the cost of living pinch. They're looking for a government that they can see is changing things in the way that they voted for just over 15 months ago. We're in the early stages of that. And if you look at Healey, look, I think what that tells you is that people wanted change. They didn't want reform. They voted Plaid. And the medium-term challenge for us as Labour is to reclaim that confidence, that belief that was there in July 2024, that they could look to Labour for the change that they thought the country needed and the change that they thought that their family and their opportunities needed as well. That's our task. And part of my job is not just defending the country and strengthening our British security, it's winning the sort of deals like this one that will mean defence, drives economic growth, produces the new jobs, skills and opportunities that people need right across the UK.
John, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So I did want to move the conversation on a bit because it's been very striking in the last week or two. I mentioned you know, that resonant phrase, the progressive consensus that the new deputy leader, Lucy Powell, wants the government to move towards. But in general, this is a government that does appear to be shifting its position. So, for example, for the first time in years, we've heard a senior Labour politician, in this case, Rachel Reeves, saying the reason the economy is in such a mess is because of Brexit. And you obviously take completely different positions on Brexit, but I just wanted to ask both of you whether you think this is just her making excuses ahead of all the money she's going to have to raise from higher taxes, or whether you think it's possible that the government will change its position in respect of our relationship with the EU and will negotiate, for example, customs union membership or single market membership. What do you think?
There's an inevitability about the fact that the UK leaving the European Union has had enormous consequences for the economy, and as such, in the not-too-distant future, it's going to have to change its position in respect of its relationship with the EU. Because when you look at the fundamentals of the UK economy, whether it's productivity or trade, the decisions that have been made are appalling. Now, Rachel Reeves is right to highlight this, as the Governor of the Bank of England has recently too. But what I can't understand is Rachel Reeves voted to trigger Article 50. If you look on the list of people who voted, it says Jacob Rees-Mogg, and then it says Rachel Reeves. So she voted for this. She knew what would happen. I think it's disingenuous for her to now say, oh, I wasn't aware that this was going to be the consequence. She was perfectly aware, and she's reaping what she knows too.
Now, Esther, you definitely take a different view.
Yeah, the reality is Rachel Reeves is single-handedly destroying our economy. She, at her last budget, came forward with the biggest ever tax-raising budget on record of £70 billion, taxing business. She said, I'll fix the foundations. I won't be coming back. She didn't mention Brexit then, even though it would have been around for 9 years. But now, because she's destroyed the economy and she's coming back for another 30 billion, she's got to find other people to blame. But single-handedly, ever since Labour have been in office, every month, unemployment has gone up. Construction has now fallen for 9 consecutive months. Manufacturing is going down. Honestly, what she has done is a disgrace. So, of course, it's a rather pathetic excuse for her poor steering of the economy.
I think the Office for Budget Responsibility will also blame Brexit, and so you can come back and criticise the OBR as well. But I should actually, but I do have to sort of. So
the economists, they go back actually to the economic crash, the financial crash in 2008.
The 2007-8 crash was also an absolute catastrophe. You're absolutely right. But there is one point.
And if you
I need to move us on.
I just want to say something,
Go on, please.
Because actually, if you look at what is happening both in France and Germany, that they never did a Brexit, did they? And they are doing worse than Britain. So they're doing worse than us economically. So I don't really think
they have significantly higher living standards.
So I don't
think growth is absent from those countries as well.
I
need to make 2 points. One is still an enormous amount of money. Actually, her tax rising was 40 billion. The other 30 took you to 70 was borrowing. Yeah, you said taxes were 70.
No, I said the highest tax raising a budget on record,
but you said
which it was.
I'm not going to argue about it because it doesn't matter. But the thing that does matter is, do you think there's sort of leaks, but we don't know whether these are real leaks or flying kites, that she's going to put income tax up, which would break the manifesto? Would that be curtains for the Labour government if they broke the manifesto by raising income tax?
She broke the manifesto last year with the national insurance increase on employers' contributions. All they did was argue that didn't break the manifesto. When everyone knows
would it be a catastrophe for them if they raised income tax? Would that be the point at which there's no coming back?
The thing is, she's been a catastrophe, and now she's between a rock and a hard place, and she doesn't know what to do. And that actually is the problem, whereas businesses are saying to her, we cannot be taxed anymore. We need you to do something, even if she just did something about energy prices and not follow Ed Miliband's sort of religious zealotry on net zero. She needs to do something, get regulation down. She needs to allow businesses to breathe again.
Frustratingly, we are out of time. That's it. I'm off home to watch some Milky Bar Kid and Flake adverts from the 1970s, just to remind myself how great this country once was. That's a joke, by the way. Good night.